So I don't know. I sort of figured, let me just keep creating stuff. I started a podcast too in January. Let me
I
just
want to hear
put
about
stuff out
that.
there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So wait, now, okay. Let's see. Facebook group was a success. A little bit less of that now because you're at full capacity. So why start the podcast? Tell me about that.
I don't know. I really don't know. It just sort of felt like I have all this content in my head, and I've discussed it in so many ways in so many forums. Typed it in the Facebook group, wrote about it in my monthly newsletter, talked about it through either Facebook Live videos or the YouTube videos. So like I got the content here. It's just put me in front of a microphone. I can spit it out. So I was like, why not do a podcast? Not knowing what I want. Again, I don't want business from it, but my next step is I don't know exactly. I don't want to grow an empire of a business, and I'm too sort of shy, I think, to ask people for money for my content. But I like making content, and I like feeling like I'm educating and helping people. So I'm just putting it out there. Podcast was a different forum. Some people aren't on Facebook. A lot of people aren't on Facebook. Anyone could access YouTube, but some people don't like it. They'd rather hear things, download it and listen to it on their walks or whatever. So it's like, okay, let me do a podcast. And it's not that hard to do because, they get released every Thursday at 1 a.m., but I can record them at my own pace and just, pre-schedule a release. Whereas Facebook Lives, that was every Wednesday live. So I knew I'd be winding down Facebook Live at some point. So I started up the podcast knowing that I'll have some energy and time to redirect from the Facebook Lives to the podcast where I can do it more on my own time.
Okay. Was it hard to get the podcast started? Like just, talking about equipment or talking about how to get it all working so that it gets to the right platforms?
No, it did take some research. I did talk to a few different people who produce these things professionally, for a fee, and talk to them about equipment, what to consider, how much it would cost for them. My thought was I just sit in front of a microphone, hit record, send them the sound file, let them do all the work where they lace in an intro and outro and they clean it up and stuff like that. And not to be cheap about it, but it wasn't free. Mm-hmm. And depending who you looked for, it was $20 to $50 an episode for them to do it. And I knew I planned on doing it monthly. And since I knew I wasn't monetizing it at least day one, I'm like, let me see if I can do this myself. So the more I researched, I found out it's really not that hard. I don't mean this as a plug. I'm sure there's other providers out there, but there's a service called Alitu, A-L-I-T-U, that I ended up using. That's where I actually create the podcast. So I'll record a sound file on my computer. I did pay someone on Fiverr, a professional voice person, to record an intro and outro. So it's not just me, my New Jersey voice. So I paid for that. So I have different sound files. I go in Alitu, I dump up there my intro that I got recorded, the outro I got recorded from the Fiverr person. I dump in my body of content, and you literally drag and drop. And it's really easy. And you can do like transitions and stuff like that and add in sound. So I produce them all myself in that sense, but it's all, click and drag that any monkey like me can do. And then I just researched, and it works well. It's $30 a month, maybe, give or take, which I thought was reasonable. And then I had to find a hosting platform, of which there's a bunch, but I ended up using Buzzsprout just because from what I read, it seems to be one of the better ones, easier to use, has connectivity to all the big platforms you want to be on. You have to be on Apple, you have to be on Google, Amazon as well, and then the rest of them tail off pretty quickly in terms of Pandora, Spotify, and a bunch of other no-name ones. And that's $20 a month maybe. So just look into it. Figured let me try it myself, and I did, and I'm happy with it. It's not pro level quality audio, but between the professional voice recorded intro and outro, laced in a little bit of sound, I'm plenty happy with how it turned out. So
yeah, okay. Are you able to get any sort of metrics behind the podcast, or does it not matter because you don't care? You're just putting it out there.
A bit of both. Same thing with my website. It's hooked up to Google Analytics, but I looked at that maybe 3 times in 2 years. All I knew was I was getting prospects enough for what I wanted, so fine. I didn't particularly care. I knew they were coming from Facebook, so I guess I didn't need to do the research. But with the podcast, yes, there are analytics behind it. I don't pay too much attention. I do look at downloads. I get now across the whole body of 20-something podcasts I have, I get 3,000 to 4,000 downloads a week, which from what I read is respectable, and apparently the top 5% of all podcasts. So
wow.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
But I don't look at where they're coming from. I did once. You can see the vast majority are Apple, what do they call iTunes, iPlay, whatever, Apple Podcasts.
Uh-huh.
The next are Google, and then the rest tail off real fast. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's getting out there enough. And I do use all my content to reference one another. So in the podcast, at the end, trying to make it a pitch. At the end, I will say, hey, if you like this podcast, check out my Facebook group, my YouTube channel, my newsletter, to which there's links to all 3 of those in the show notes to the podcast. Same thing in my newsletter. I'll often tie in stuff from YouTube and podcasts or Facebook. And Facebook, I use, it's a big platform of people now where I don't want to be greasy and too self-promoting, but I do use that when I, feel the need to make an announcement or share something with people.
Mm-hmm.
So they all sort of work in conjunction with one another now, which is nice.
Yeah, that sounds really smart. That's a great idea.
Yeah.